Hello and welcome back to Tricolor Gaming with me, Fletcher. And welcome to a bit of a different video today, because I'm joined by another friend of mine. Say hello.
Hello.
This is Nerd Guy. He's a member of the Triclaw Discord and Triclaw channel already, and a good friend. And he is here with me today because we're going to go through the first Jurassic World movie together. And he is bringing his university education with you, aren't you?
Yes, I do have a film degree, which hasn't done exactly too much for me, but I do have an intimate knowledge of how movies are created, how scripts typically should be structured, and the general flow that you want a film to take. But, of course, as with everything, it's all objective. Or, it's subjective, not objective.
Exactly. So we're going to be going through the first Jurassic World film. We're going to be looking at the story, we're going to be looking at the characters, we're going to be looking at the writing in order to come to a conclusion. And Nerd Guy is in the perfect place to do this because he isn't a dedicated hardcore fan of the franchise.
True. I've seen all the original Jurassic Park movies, but when I originally saw Jurassic World, I had no real attachment to the franchise. Like, I enjoyed it, but I had never been like the biggest fan of dinosaurs or anything like that. So I just went into it looking to experience a good action or survival type movie, and I felt mostly satisfied the first time around. The second time around, things changed a bit.
So I think a good place to start might actually be to go over what you think about the original movies, since you're not a dedicated fan.
Well, I still haven't seen the second or third ones since I originally saw them when they came out, but I do still have a very high opinion of the first one. I just believe it's well paced, has very likable characters, and despite being about a night of surviving a bunch of dinosaurs, it has a very realistic and grounded tone to it. Or that's not even always necessarily true, but it is especially true in comparison to the new franchise. And the second and third ones, I remember very little about them, just an overall opinion of definitely not as good as the first one. And if I recall, again, I still don't remember if it's the second or the third one where they're in the city with dinosaurs for a brief moment. Or
that would be number 2.
Okay, I do remember thinking that was ridiculous. Like when I saw that, I was like, okay, I don't know if I like this. So I don't have a super high opinion of the second and third one, but the first one I still think is a fantastic movie.
So what is our opinion, the too long didn't read version of Jurassic World? Where do we start with that? What's our general thoughts?
My general thoughts is Jurassic World, while mostly not being an overtly offensive plot or anything like that, it certainly lacks the cohesion and the more straightforward nature of the original Jurassic Park that it does borrow from and builds off of. So even though Jurassic World has some entertaining elements and some standout moments, it for the most part ends up being overshadowed by some pretty poorly written plot lines and some lackluster characters. Yeah, some of the characters are just not as interesting as you would like them to be. One I definitely like more than you do, though.
For obvious reasons.
What do you mean for obvious reasons?
Well, you only like him because he's...
No, not him. Who do you mean him?
Oh, I was referring to Chris Pratt.
No, he sucks. He's Chris Pratt himself, I am not a fan of. And the character Owen is a very two-dimensional, just tough, rough guy who kind of just is there to be the action hero of the movie for no real reason. Some people compare him to Alan Grant, and I don't think that's suitable at all because, I don't know, Alan was a scientist who got into some crazy shit, obviously, in the original movies, but he never was the action hero or the cool guy or anything. If anything, he got made fun of for being so nerdy about dinosaurs, which, I don't know, it just made him a more interesting character than I think Owen ever will be.
Yeah, I don't like a majority of the characters in Jurassic World. I think they're all quite poorly written. I thought Owen Grady was a very clear attempt to recreate Alan Grant in a more modern image, which didn't work. And I thought the movie's premise in itself was a bit bizarre, which I suppose leads us on to discussing the movie in more detail. So the movie set up the very first few scenes. We get introduced to the two kids right at the very start.
Right.
One of them being an obvious replacement for the kid in Jurassic Park who was the dinosaur nerd. He's obviously being replaced in this movie with the new guy. And I think both me and you thought it was curious that in a world where Jurassic World, that's going to happen a lot, I think, had been open for a while, that this kid's bedroom had absolutely no paraphernalia of dinosaurs or Jurassic World in it whatsoever.
I mean, it has dinosaur things. He has dinosaur stuff in his room, just nothing Jurassic World themed.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few dinosaurs, but most of his room is like telescopes and a weird obsession with vintage cameras, which is
I mean, that's like the hip thing that kids do now, is be into, vintage stuff.
But he's obviously the dinosaur nerd, and his older brother is obviously he's not really a replacement for the girl Lex from the first film. He's just an older brother, and he's already a bit of a douchebag right at the very beginning, the way that he's treating his obviously clingy girlfriend. He's obviously set up to be the douchebag brother, and the movie is probably going to make them have to put aside their differences as brothers go to survive.
Right. I mean, it's certainly predictable, but it also works for me. It's one of the plots in the movie that I didn't take offense to. I was like, all right, well, it's very straightforward, but, it's an age-old classic. Put the two characters that don't like each other into a situation where they need to work together and eventually come out with a stronger relationship. I didn't mind it at all. It's not really copying the first one, because in the first, there never really felt like there was all that much tension between the siblings at all. They were already a pretty decent unit together from the start. So in that regard, I guess the new movie did go for something different than the original. Just not something different in terms of film.
There is also the underlying divorce of the parents that kind of gets mentioned at the very beginning, gets mentioned a little bit later on, and then it's kind of forgotten about and is no longer necessary or important, so one wonders why it was mentioned in the first place.
Yeah, I don't particularly see why that was brought up. I think there is a scene with the mom where it's just kind of meant to tug at the heartstrings, but it doesn't really do anything because you don't know the father at all, and you're still at that point getting to know the kids and Claire, so it just didn't really land at all, and they didn't go anywhere with it, so I don't particularly see why they wasted any time on it.
Claire has not yet been introduced. She doesn't get introduced until after we have our super nostalgic monorail going through the gates, and then we see the park is fully open, and we have the big pyramid building and everything else, and we're all supposed to be wowed, and we have the nostalgic musical score from the original movie just to...
I was thoroughly wowed when they showed the park, like the first shot of it. I mean, it is still CGI heavy, but again, I don't take too much offense to that either. That's modern film. It's just kind of how it is. And I thought the park looked nice. I was like, I would want to go here. This looks very, very cool. This would be a very nice vacation spot. And I am a bit of a sucker for the original John Williams score.
It is a good score. And then we have our next character introduction being Claire Dearing. My most hated character.
She is my favorite character. She's the one that I was talking about.
Everyone in the Triclord Discord that is the dinosaur fan, they all hate Claire Dearing. Every time Claire Dearing gets mentioned, they come up with ways to kill her off. How would you describe her character as she's introduced here at the very start?
I mean, at the very start, she is very much shown as a all business, all numbers person, she doesn't see people for people or the animals for animals. Everything is sort of just categorized in a database in her head, which I don't know. I enjoyed her arc over the movie where she learned to see the animals and people for what they actually are. And she learned to be more of a person. I'm like, I enjoy seeing characters like that. And she had, in my opinion, some of the more funny lines in the entire movie.
But she's the one that brings in this weird plot point that the whole movie seems based around, that dinosaurs aren't appealing.
Yeah, that doesn't really track.
You mentioned that the park itself, just from all the scenes we saw at the outside of the park and all the inside scenes, it's packed, it's busy.
Yeah, they make a show of how busy it is, so I don't know why they clash those two things together. Unless it's just corporate talk, where, I mean, I guess that does happen, where some corporations see a packed park and they're like, oh, we're dead. It's dead out there. We're completely dead. We need to do something to boost business even more. Like, I don't know. It doesn't seem like that's what they're going for. It seemed like they just kind of didn't really think about that.
I just don't think it's a very believable plot point, because the whole rest of the sort of the movie, the hybrid and everything else, all stems from this one sort of throwaway sentence that no one's interested in a dinosaur anymore. Which,
yeah, I just don't buy that.
I don't no. I don't buy that.
If this was a sequel that took place 50, 100 years from Jurassic Park, I might at that point believe, yeah, maybe people would start to lose, the wow factor of a dinosaur because it's been around for quite a long time. Like, there are kids at that point who have been born with dinosaurs around their whole lives. But we have not gotten to that point. It's been how many years exactly since this open? Not even since Jurassic Park. Since Jurassic World has opened to the public, how many years has it been?
A few years.
Then there should be absolutely no reason that interest would be dying down. At least in my opinion, I highly doubt people would lose interest in live dinosaurs that in this movie they showcase that you can actually touch and everything in a couple of years. There's no way. So
we have Claire Dearing wooing the investors who are being typically corporate about it all, and we then have the reintroduction of Dr. Wu from the original, who is now a Cheshire grin smiling turtleneck jumper obvious evil guy, which again is a very strange course of affairs, considering his very first appearance in Jurassic Park. He was a happy, relaxed scientist fellow who probably wouldn't hurt a fly, and then in this he's supposed to kind of be in the villain camp.
I mean, I'm a little biased just because I love this actor playing villainous roles, so seeing him get his little mustache twirly evil scientist gig here, I was kind of enjoying it. I'm like, all right, living your best life, brewing up crazy monsters and stuff in a lab, which we will get to in a moment.
Yes, basically he's here just to introduce this Indominus Rex, which is supposed to be, we get told it's going to be bigger than the T-Rex.
Was it?
Which I think
bigger? I think it was like the same size.
Well, apparently when it's fully grown, Wu states it's going to be bigger than the T-Rex.
No, it's still an adolescent.
Trying to obviously raise the stakes, because T-Rex has kind of been the villain for every movie apart from number 3.
Yeah, they had the, what was it, the Spino in that one?
The Spinosaurus in that one.
There's so many dinosaurs you can come up with. There's some really freaky looking ones as well, I add. I feel like you have plenty of, quote unquote villain dinosaur options besides the T-Rex or straight up hybrid monster.
You could almost argue that perhaps they should have used the Therizinosaurus or the Giganotosaurus that they used in Dominion in the first film instead of this stupid hybrid. I mean, those are actually actual dinosaurs that could have been used instead of this Indominus Rex.
Like, actually, the way they play this plot out, a regular real dinosaur would not have worked, now that I think about it, because That's actually one of my bigger gripes about the Indominus Rex and the movie in general, is that it straight up has superpowers.
I think we'll get to that more later on.
All right, yeah.
But no, I do agree with you on that. We just have a few references in later scenes. We have the Spinosaurus skeleton on Main Street. We then go into the big pyramid building, and we have the kids doing, well, the dinosaur kid doing what dinosaur kids do, and older brother doing what older brothers do, which seems primarily be trying to catch the eye of any girl that he sees. And we have the first interaction between Claire and the kids, and it's very obvious that Claire hasn't a clue what she's doing.
See, I really enjoy seeing that. Like, a person who has no idea how to talk to a child. She's just at a complete loss. It was rather endearing to me, I thought.
It does raise the question of why the kids' parents let them go alone to a dinosaur-infested island with a sister she clearly doesn't speak very much to.
American parents will do some crazy stuff, trust me.
It's also apparently Christmas. This was something that we noticed at the very start of the movie. We have snow, we have Christmas music, we have Christmas trees, but on the island there's no Christmas. You would have thought like a big corporate run luxury resort would be all over the Christmas theme.
Even if they didn't want to do Christmas, they'd at least have something, for the holiday season in general, to be festive about it. There's almost no theme park or zoo or hotel or any major corporation that doesn't capitalize on stuff like that. So, yeah, that was a little odd.
And then we have this brilliant scene in the control room, which I want to talk a little bit more in depth. We have Claire Dearing wander in, and we have this IT guy, Lowry, who is wearing an original Jurassic Park t-shirt, which he apparently got on eBay somehow.
I'm sure it's on there.
Claire Dearing tells him, "Don't you think that's in poor taste?" And Lowry is like, no, the first park was legit. They didn't need to have sponsored dinosaurs in order to make it work.
Yes, a little wink at the audience.
Wink at the audience, considering the whole reason for Jurassic World existing is because it is in bad taste, to me at least anyway. This is, considering what happens with Fallen Kingdom and Dominion, it's milking a franchise just for a bit of extra cash for Universal.
I'm sure there have to be, and I would actually bet a majority of the crew working on all the Jurassic World movies are huge fans of Jurassic Park and really do want to make a great Jurassic World movie, but unfortunately they are hindered by writers that don't seem to care about that at all, which is the major issue. Although I do appreciate whenever they do these little wink winks at the audience, just as a little heads up for the writers to be like, yeah, we understand. We hear your complaints. Just hear us out for a moment. It's like, it does actually give me pause and get me to relax for a moment and try and see what they're, going for.
We also have we're told about the implants that all the dinosaurs have in their head, which apparently is supposed to track them and everything, which is going to become relevant later on. And we have Simon Masrani is introduced as the owner, whose actor, unfortunately, I believe, died quite early into the corona epidemic. We're introduced to him as he's portrayed as the distant owner, but apparently knew Hammond, liked Hammond's dream, references Hammond in using his spared no expense line, compared to Claire Dearing, who spends all the time in the back of the helicopter just quoting, figures and pricing and everything else. He doesn't care about any of that. He just wants... His interest is in the dinosaurs and if people are enjoying themselves. He's more of a John Hammond character in this movie. Whereas I think Claire Dearing is I don't think she has a similar character in any of the other three movies. She does remind me a bit like Ian Malcolm in the first film. Yeah. Very cautious and very...
Yeah, that's another reason I feel like I like Claire, at least in this first movie, is I don't see the exact clear-cut character that she's representing from the first. She feels a little more fresh to me. But what's his name again? I always forget.
Simon Masrani.
He was a character, I don't know, I never really got much out of him. I felt like there were scenes that went back and forth with him being both a very negligent owner of this park and negligent to the animals and everything, and then in other times where he seemed to really care about them and the people. So I felt like they flip-flopped on it a little too much for me until they, finally end the character the way they do. I don't know. He wasn't exactly a character that worked for me.
And we have the foreshadowing here. They go to the Indominus Rex paddock and the glass is cracked because apparently she tried to get out. We hear that she ate her brother.
Vicious.
And that she's white-skinned, albino.
Every time they say something is white-skinned, I might add, in anything, they're doing that on House of the Dragon now as well. They're like, oh, this white dragon. It's always like this really dark gray. Make it white, all right? If you're going to call it white, make it white, please. This Indominus Rex does not look very white to me.
It's obvious foreshadowing, because this is the big bad guy of the film. Masrani claims that he likes her spirit.
Cannibal.
And then we have the introduction of the raptors, and great.
I've really disliked this scene. I really dislike this whole encounter. Almost everything about this scene I did not enjoy.
So let's get the obvious one out of the way. It's treating the velociraptors like pets. This is the obvious problem with this movie. The raptors were, for the original films, these are the creepy bad guys. These are the guys that chase the kids through the kitchen, caught Muldoon unawares. The same things that chased Ian and Malcolm around the island in The Lost World, and the same raptors that also tracked down Alan Grant and co in Jurassic Park 3 because they stole their eggs. These are dangerous creatures, and yet this film turns them into pets.
I mean, that does seem to be a common trend with a lot of modern stuff, to take the bad guy and turn them into the surprise friend that you never knew you wanted kind of idea. But I just really dislike these reptilian looking dinosaurs acting like domestic dogs. Like, obviously they make them a bit more animalistic and everything, but the fact that they can be trained, the fact that they're being considered for a weapon program, it's just too ridiculous to me.
Can I also say how brilliantly Blue is designed to be perfect for merchandising as the only one with any distinct coloration to her whatsoever.
I mean, I'm okay with that just because she looks cool. I'll admit, like the little blue streak, she's a very cool looking raptor. If there was a little plushie of Blue, I wouldn't buy it, but I'm sure plenty of people would.
Got one on the shelves behind me.
See, it worked. They know what they're doing.
Yes, and then this scene leads into Hodgkins.
Just a silly character. Another one that just doesn't work for me because he's just too overtly asshole-ish for like no real reason either. Just has to be the antagonist of the movie, so is therefore exceedingly hostile towards everyone around him. And again, I just think the whole weaponized dinosaurs thing is unbelievably ridiculous. I don't see how anyone with a logical functioning brain could think that could work. No. That's something we did, I suppose, a long time ago with like elephants and things in war, but
that was only because we didn't have anything better. I mean, the minute the tank came along, horses and cavalry was a thing of the past the minute the tank was developed. I don't see the armies of the world queuing up to have a pack of potentially more hazardous to your own men animals than the enemy.
Yeah, it just seems like a ridiculous concept. And
friendly fire incidents are bad enough.
And obviously they tried to kind of correct that. I believe it's only later in the film, so I don't know if we should get into it too much, but they do seem to try and correct that reasoning. Like, oh, they're wild animals? Well, we have a way around that kind of situation, which was equally ridiculous in my opinion.
And then we have a kind of pointless action scene where the pig guy falls into the paddock. See, I find it really surprising there's no safety netting or anything.
Yeah, I mean, this is absolutely a moment where you're like, there, I'm sure, would be more safety measures than this, but I don't hate them wanting to put in a little bit of an action scene here just to kind of increase the pace, just give you something a little frenetic to look at for a moment. But then they do this dumb thing with the hand and I hate it. It makes no sense to me.
Which apparently works on every single dinosaur now in Dominion. He does it to pretty much every dinosaur in that movie now, not just the raptors.
I still haven't seen Dominion, but yeah, I mean, even with the raptors, it doesn't make any sense to me. Again, it is just, in a way, sort of domesticating and training this wild beast. It's too silly. If this was a fantasy film, where, I don't know, this was medieval times and they had magic and dinosaurs and stuff, I'd believe it there. But this is supposed to be a little bit more in the realm of reality than that.
And then we switch to this petting zoo scene of kids riding around on baby triceratops.
Which is excessively cruel.
I can't even... Not only is it cruelty to animals, but even a baby triceratops would be very heavy and very dangerous.
Could absolutely kill one of these children.
This whole paddock here is a lawsuit waiting to happen.
But as I said when we watched this, I do believe that they would do this. Like, the appeal to do something like this would be too good of an opportunity for them to not monetize. And the fact that it's only a few years into this park being around, it's plausible that such accident hasn't occurred yet, but probably will about 2 weeks from now. And I totally buy that would happen.
And then we have this really weird scene in between the kids going around the park and seeing the dinosaur, and we get the mosasaurus scene and everything else. We have this weird blubbering phone call between Mother and Claire Deering.
I just don't see why they spend so much time having us try to feel this kind of relationship with the kids or Claire to the mother, because the mother's not integral to the plot in any way. So it really always just feels like a diversion that you never get any payoff for, because at the end of the movie they see her and, you know, they hug her, but like there is no payoff to any of these types of scenes. So it just feels like a random diversion. And in the moment, there's no real reason to feel very sorry for her as she's talking about this divorce and how tough everything's been, because you don't know any of these characters yet. You're like, okay, that sounds like it's been rough. I'm sorry.
Moving past that, we then have Claire and Owen interaction, where we learn that they dated at one point.
It also feels kind of needless for these two to have a romantic interest in each other. I would have been more interested seeing this, you know, uptight businesswoman dealing with this very like relaxed man's man. Those clashing personalities, I think, are fun to, you know, watch interact with each other, but the romantic subplot just feels very forced. I don't really see the purpose to it.
And I'm not a big fan of Chris Pratt anyway, so frankly, Claire Deering, you can do better than Chris Pratt.
I agree.
So, after that awful scene with Claire Deering and Owen, we then get some spectacle with the Mosasaurus feeding display.
Which I am totally fine with all the spectacle here. I love the Mosasaur. But as you have told me, this is not correct to scale.
Nowhere near correct to scale. And in actual fact, the Mosasaur changes its size several times during the movie. Because that size it is depicted in the spray is a lot larger than it is when depicted next to the Indominus Rex later on. It's a nice bit of spectacle. I mean, the film doesn't have to be paleontologically correct, obviously, and it's kind of the end. It's kind of what we thought was the end of Act 1, because then after this point, we have the ramping up of crisis. So I think maybe, given that this is the end of Act 1, who's our favourite character?
Is this the end? Okay, wait. Yeah, okay, I would say that is the end of Act 1, because, yes.
Yes, because the beginning of Act 2 starts with this whole awful scenario, which we'll go into in a minute. So, who's our favourite character? As we've been introduced to them all now in Act 1. Who's our favourite? Who are we rooting for?
In terms of most likable that it seems they want the audience to root for, it's definitely a kid who's into dinosaurs. He's the truly innocent party. He's the least offensive or mean in terms of any of the characters. But for me, the one who's most interesting, probably throughout the film, is Claire to me. Again, I just enjoy seeing such a robotic person break that robotic type of thinking.
I think for me it was, I think I was probably more of a fan of Masrani than anyone else in the film, just because he was the John Hammond character, and John Hammond is one of the much beloved characters of the first one.
True. Which I have to admit, I don't have much love for him in the original as well. I hate to say, I'm sorry. That might be blasphemy, but he did more for me than Masrani did. But I'm not like super attached to that character.
So Act 2 starts with Claire and Discount Alan Grant, as I'm calling him, going to see the Indominus Rex enclosure, and Owen clearly apparently not being very happy. Now, I think it's worth noting here, there are tons of people behind them as they walk up these stairs and everything else. The whole paddock is still under construction. There are lots of people walking around.
Yep.
And I think
definitely construction workers, tons of people all over the place. There's people up on the scaffolding as well. So
yeah, which I think is relevant for what happens here when they go and have a look in the paddock. We basically have Owen pointing out the scratch marks on the wall, and apparently the dinosaur has hidden itself from the thermal cameras, or the thermal cameras can't detect it.
And that's the start of my, I guess, disbelief to the whole thing. I was perfectly on board when they said we have this hybrid dinosaur. It's an Indominus Rex. It's bigger, stronger, scarier, blah blah blah. I was on board with that. As soon as they started throwing actual superpowers out, I started to have a hard time following along, because this whole vanishing off of thermal scans, as far as I know, there is not a single animal alive that can do something like that, or at least in a split second or something. So that was my first bit of disbelief with this whole scene. I'm like, that cannot be possible, but it is.
No. And then they believe it has escaped, which is a strange thing to believe in itself, because there's loads of workers outside. Someone would have seen it if it had escaped.
Right.
And then they just wander into the paddock without even...
At this point, it still has its tracker in it as well.
Yeah.
Which they say, they believe it cut it out or something, right?
That doesn't happen until later on.
It doesn't, but that's what they assume, right? Considering...
Yeah.
I mean, they must check this.
It just baffles me that they wouldn't check with them first, before even going into... They just walk into the paddock without even checking.
Right, but they need a big action sequence to get this thing out.
They need a pointless action scene. And we have the first sort of proper sighting of the Indominus Rex going off and, well, okay, again, also, Indominus Rex kills the guy, but the worker opens the only door between the paddock and the outside world.
Yeah, and they did just come through a smaller door.
Like, why would you have one door? 2 would be the bare minimum. And why would you have some lowly security guard who wasn't even that bothered with his job? Why would you even give him the authority to open the door?
I mean, I think, justify both of those things. The first, sort of a flimsy one, but it is still under construction, so it's possible that they were constructing a second line of defense when this happened. I mean, it certainly should have been done sooner, but again, flimsy defense, but perhaps they were making it. They were in the process of making it. And in America, or with American employees, and this does appear to be an American-run theme park, despite being... where is it exactly?
It's on the islands near Costa Rica.
Okay, yeah. So, but I do believe it's still under, like, American jurisdiction, technically. Or at least it seems to be. All the employees seem to be American.
Yeah. Although the Costa Rican military was in control of the islands in Lost World and JP3. They were basically militarily supposed to secure the islands, so...
I'm not too sure then, but at least for any American corporation, I do see them handing over a lot of authority to a complete idiot who doesn't take his job seriously. In that regard, I can see it happening. It's more just the 2 lines of defense, I believe. I agree, it's kind of ridiculous.
For me, it's just a really badly designed paddock. Like, we're supposed to believe that this single wall of quite thin concrete that's not even electrified, and we know as standard, pretty much every dinosaur fence we've ever seen is electrified.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose they were fighting an uphill battle on that one, because the first one, the original Jurassic Park, I think had almost the perfect setup for the disaster because it was intentional sabotage. That makes sense as to how, you know, all these security systems would go offline and they would really and truly be in a bad situation. And here, they obviously didn't want to copy that, you know, note for note, so they had to come up with something else. And in actual zoos and everything that we have now, humans have pretty well perfected how to contain an animal in a certain space. So they certainly had to really reach for a way to get that Indominus out of the cage. I think they certainly could have done a better job, but they were working with a difficult situation, I admit.
And then between it and the next important scene, we have a kind of some inconsequential dinosaur beauty shot stuff. We have the 2 kids have their brotherly conversation about the divorce.
Which again, I just don't see how it adds anything.
The next important scene is we have the Asset Containment Unit, the ACU, with their fancy military gear.
I like their gear. I think it looks cool. Might not be the most functional, but I think it looks very cool.
Tracking down the Indominus Rex. And we have this, that it's pulled out its tracker.
And yeah, this is where it kind of entirely lost me. The superhuman intelligence it would need to have to know exactly where it is, to pull it out, and then to leave it as a trap for the humans to follow. How could it possibly know these things as an animal? It does not make sense. Like, I'll admit, this scene is kind of neat, just it eating people. It's very vicious and everything, but aside from that, it makes no sense at all.
No, and then it has we also then have the reveal that it can camouflage itself as well.
Yes, it can turn invisible. Which, again, how many superpowers does this thing have?
So, what is the list of its superpowers so far? It can camouflage. It has superhuman intelligence.
It can regulate its body temperature at superhuman or super animal levels, I guess.
Yep. It also bounces off a bazooka shell later on.
That's really, I don't remember that.
It's certainly racking up a lot of. It's become less of a dinosaur and more of a kaiju. It's just like it's a monster now, not a dinosaur.
I mean, it works for a lot of audience goers. Unfortunately, in my opinion, I don't like it when they do it even just with real animals, where they just turn the animal into this mindless monster. That's just not how animals work. And it, for me, kind of breaks the immersion. It breaks the reality of the situation. Like, this Indominus Rex is just a mindless killing machine that has no goal other than kill everything it sees, which is not what any animal, aside from one maybe infected with like rabies, would do.
I mean, the asset containment team completely fails in its job to stop the Indominus Rex.
It did seem a little underprepared for that.
They did seem a little underprepared. And then, after the Indominus Rex goes on its massacre and kills everyone, we then have Dr. Wu doing
Dr. Wu stuff. Yes.
And we have basically a 5-minute exposition scene of Masrani asking Dr. Wu why it can do all of the superpowers it's been given and coming up with flimsy-ass excuses.
This scene is interesting because it has elements that I really like some of the best dialogue in the film, and it also has some of the worst. It goes back and forth of having a singular moment of raising a question that I think is very pertinent and should definitely be in the scene, and then other moments where it's just these flimsy excuses for how their kaiju has superpowers. And it's weird to me that it goes back and forth so frequently throughout this scene.
Yes, and we have the you didn't ask for you asked for cooler, you wanted more teeth, and you can't have that without massively mutated results.
Which I really like that line. I'm like, that is both calling out the audience and raising an interesting point. I thought that was good.
It's just a shame that the film kind of following this basically also came up with yet another mutant hybrid, which was even cooler. And then the animated show they came up with an even cooler mutant hybrid thing. The ramping up of their abilities to meaningless. I mean, just thinking about the Indominus Raptor can be controlled by laser pointer to go and kill anything it wants to kill, is bulletproof, and is apparently very intelligent. The Scorpius Rex, which was introduced in the animated TV show they decided to create, is like the Indoraptor, but also has scorpion venom quills that it can fire at people.
I mean, again, they just want it to be, fantasy monster stuff as opposed to dinosaurs, which, again, I think it's a shame because there is so much you could do just with regular old dinosaurs being a part of the equation. But they seem to want to make the dinosaurs characters in themselves, which I think is one of the reasons they're running into some problems with this franchise. Because that wasn't really the case, at least in the first Jurassic Park. Like, the dinosaurs, you could say some of the raptors or certain dinosaurs had a little personality, but none of them were a focal point of the movie. None of them were like the point of it all. They would kind of come in, do their thing, they would leave. Whereas here, they really want at least certain dinosaurs or, hybrid monsters to be full-on characters that you are supposed to follow as if they're a villain, it's just a completely different take on Jurassic Park, in my opinion. Which is one reason why I don't think this is like a complete copy of Jurassic Park. I think it is kind of a totally different premise, but not necessarily in a good way.
It's almost as if I can almost hear the Universal executives in the boardroom saying, oh, well, with modern day CGI, no one's interested in dinosaurs anymore. Like, that line from Claire Dearing that no one looks at a dinosaur with any sort of wonder anymore, I can almost see it being spoken in the Universal boardroom, and that's why we have to have a fake dinosaur for this movie, because no one's interested in just a dinosaur anymore.
Which I don't think is true, even in terms of film. I think there are still plenty of people who are firmly interested in that, as indicated by the discourse that some of these movies have created.
And actually, what you were saying about, how the dinosaurs in the original just kind of popped in, did their thing, and left. It reminds me very much of how the alien is treated in the first Aliens film.
Yeah,
you very rarely see it. It just pops in, does its business, and then disappears off again to leave the characters in stupefied wonder.
Yeah. But yes, I agree. Sometimes less is more. But I think this being Jurassic World, like, Jurassic Park has already happened. We've seen a fair few dinosaurs. We do have the capabilities that we do now with CGI. You can show more, but again, treat them the way they were treated, at least in the first movie, where they're animals. They're not domesticated, they're not characterized, they're not monsters, they're animals who behave as such. That will go a long ways in terms of making the movie more enjoyable for all.
So, as someone, you've probably got the better eye for this. This particular scene when they're in the gyrosphere, which is an entirely stupid vehicle in itself, but
I think it looks neat. All right.
It does look neat. This scene with the dinosaurs, I think the CG is actually quite bad on the animals compared to the original. I don't know what you think.
I don't think it's bad. I'm trying to think exactly what it is. Because the textures I'm seeing are very well detailed. The lighting looks good.
I don't know. They just don't
They're
look
showcasing,
as good.
They're showcasing good shadows, good reflections off the glass. But I do agree there is almost a certain uncanniness to it that doesn't quite look right. It's certainly, I wouldn't call it like video game level or anything. It does look well made, but there is something about it that doesn't feel as natural, I suppose. Like, you can tell you're looking at an effect, which at the end of the day, the ultimate goal of any CGI or effect is to trick you into thinking that's not what you're looking at, which can be quite difficult. And in this case, they did not achieve that. But I don't think the CGI is necessarily bad. I think technically it did everything right, but I do agree it stands out as CGI.
And then we have this really contrived way of getting the brothers into a dangerous situation because they decide to take their gyrosphere ball off where they're supposed to be. Which again, it is a little contrived, but I do believe that, kids do dumb things and get themselves into bad situations. The Indorex coming along and fighting the three ankylosaurs. And again, we have some demonstrations of the Indominus Rex's intelligence in the fact that it decides to tip one of them over to get to its belly. But that seems like reasonable animal intelligence. Like, there are animals that would do that. The Ankylosaurus, though, does score a direct hit to its head with its club. That would kill it. I mean, the tests on the fossil remains that we have now, it's like 35,000 newtons worth of force in the tail of an Ankylosaurus. And the Indominus Rex just shrugs that off, and again, it's just it's another superpower to add on to it. It's super durable now.
Yeah, I don't even think that's necessarily what they're going for either. I'll bet they probably just didn't realize the force that was behind the tail of that dinosaur. They just didn't look into it fully, and if they did, probably figured other people wouldn't notice that either, because I certainly didn't know that at all. So that wasn't a problem for me, specifically on the first time watching it.
I just think the Indo-Rex is just too much of a... It's almost like a Mary Sue character.
I do agree. I mean, it happens to be able to do whatever the situation requires it to do, which is especially offensive, in my opinion, later in the movie with some raptors.
We then have this really sort of... I feel it's like this forced scene where the Apatosaurus dies with Claire and Owen next to it.
Yeah.
The animatronic is really bad.
I don't think it's bad. I actually really like the animatronic here.
It looks really rubbery.
I don't necessarily agree. I think it looks pretty good.
I don't think they've got the texture of the dinosaur skin right. The eye is too big. It just looks a bit fake. But this forced sort of... This is apparently where Claire Deering becomes all dinosaur protection group, and where she becomes... this is her... I'm now going to save the dinosaurs beginning, because we've had one Apatosaurus die next to her.
Right. I mean, I do think it's just a situation of she needed to see something like that happen right in front of her, because she's always had like a computer screen to block all that stuff out. But I do think it's a little clumsy. They could have done something a bit more original. I do feel this is forced just because it is one of the few scenes in the movie that feels like a direct rip off of the first one, where they're taking care of... which character is it? I think it's Ellie who's taking care of the sick dinosaur.
Ellie's taking care of the Triceratops in the first film.
Yeah, obviously in that moment, the dinosaur doesn't die right there, but it does feel like a very direct one-to-one kind of moment. Even though it's technically not... I don't exactly know how to describe it. It certainly felt like a box was being ticked in that scene for me. And
then I kind of also feel this is another box ticking scene here with Owen and Claire have this argument while they're going looking for the kids, basically about Claire being completely unprepared for it, and Owen
I found it kind of funny. I enjoyed this.
and she does this stupid token, I'm going to roll up my t-shirt, as if that's depicting, as if that's enough to qualify her as being ready to go off.
But I mean, that's the point. I did enjoy this moment, just because she is so hilariously underprepared for it, but it's just a stubborn person who's like, no, I think I'm ready to go. And I don't know, it was just rather endearing to me. Again, any moment of romantic subtext was a little meh to me, but I thought it was a funny banter moment.
And then for the next sort of 10 to 15 minutes, the film wallows in nostalgia for the original by having the original building be in the movie, and having the kids go round the original visitor center, and having the original Jeeps and the night vision goggles, and
which is interesting because there is supposed to be a lake or like a little pond right in front of the visitor center. After watching the first one again, I did notice that, and
yeah.
It's not perfect.
I mean,
it's a nice little nostalgia moment. I think when this movie came out, I wasn't completely killed on the whole nostalgia bait stuff. Nowadays, I certainly am. But yeah, on the first go around when this came out, I was like, "Oh, cool! I remember that from the original movie."
It's
very overplayed, though.
It's very overplayed. And they go round the visitor center and find an original Jeep. Meanwhile, Hodgkins and InGen are taking over. They want to use the escape of the Indo-Rex to prove the concept that the raptors can be military weapons.
Which I would like to say, one, again, the military weapons thing is just so ridiculous to me. And two, how do you honestly think 4 raptors the size that they are could do anything to this super powered Indorex. What? Like, I don't understand any line of thinking with this.
I just find it really weird as well that like Hodgkins is allowed to kind of try to demand or dictate terms to the actual owner of the island and the whole park, and he isn't just thrown out by security. Like, I wouldn't let him into my control room and talk to me like that.
It seems implied to me that he has some sort of jurisdiction because he's a government employee of some kind, but that's something they never really make clear in any way. So yeah, it does kind of just seem like this random macho dude just comes in and takes charge and everyone says, okay, and just lets it happen.
Yeah, because they have to in order for the later events of having the raptors escape on the island. Although I do like Masrani's line where he says to him that he will not allow raptors loose on the island. And I just feel if they had just put like the word again in there, like, I will not let raptors loose on this island again.
Man, it could have been nice.
This is a nice little callback to the fact that the raptors were loose on this island to start with. Yeah, Masrani tries to put him in his place and then goes off on a helicopter equipped with a Vulcan Gatling gun.
A what?
So, the weapon that this helicopter is armed with is a Gatling gun. It's a piece of really hefty military hardware. And again, I really wonder how on earth they got... I mean, I don't see a modern day zoo going to the American military and saying, do you mind if we borrow one of your Gatling guns?
I mean, I suppose you could make an argument that with a bunch of dinosaurs, they might have made a plea and the government was like, okay, but just because you have dinosaurs. I think it's possible.
It's a bit strange because it's not a very accurate weapon. I mean, I would have thought a big rifle would have been better for the situation that they're in. But that's just nitpicking. The kids manage to start up the Jeep and run away before the Indorex gets there and gets to threaten Claire and Owen. And again, there is this scene where the Indorex is literally right next to them and somehow cannot see. And as far as I'm concerned, it has really clear line of sight between its eyes and where they are. I mean, can it not smell them?
I read this scene as it can see them and can smell them. It's just, I don't know, playing with them, I guess. Again, it's a very characterized monster. Like right here, it's like pushing up against the car. It's just making a bunch of noise. Like it seemed to me like it's just trying to scare them because it can see them. I mean, I still think that's kind of stupid. Again, it's just over-characterizing your movie monster as opposed to it being an actual animal.
Masrani decides to try to kill the Indorex, but they are basically pretty useless at it. They all have stormtrooper aim. The Indorex runs off into the aviary, smashes its way through.
Even if they hit the Indo, the bullets will probably like bounce off or something ridiculous.
She scares all the pterosaurs that are inside the aviary. The pterosaurs basically kill Simon Masrani and cause the helicopter to crash, and that's the end of him. And the pterosaurs all fly out of the aviary and are apparently now a threat because the first thing they do is decide they want to fly to the park and eat everybody.
Yeah.
Again, it's turning the creatures from creatures into monsters because, you know, it's cool for the movie if all the pterosaurs go mad and fly to the park and start killing everybody as opposed to just flying away.
Right. I mean, you could make a flimsy argument that oh god, I don't know. I'm reaching here. The Indo really riled them up, got them into an aggressive state, and I don't know, all the noise of the people at the park drew them in. To me, I think if anything, that would push them away, but again, I'm just reaching for any kind of argument to make it make some kind of sense.
They attack the park. That's the next big spectacle action scene.
Yeah, it's just the slaughter.
Of the slaughter of Main Street as all the pterosaurs attack the people there. And I don't know. It just seems like another pointless spectacle scene to me.
I mean, I think you could have done this a little easier in a more believable way. Just take the aviary, move it to the center of the park. It's right in the middle. So when you blast a big hole in it, as they're all escaping, they're not necessarily just attacking everybody, but people are getting hurt and there is mayhem because there's, all these pterosaurs swooping around and trying to get out of the park. That, I think, would have worked a little better.
It is during this scene that we have potentially one of the most overdone, excessive deaths in cinema, where
she did not deserve this either. Like, what did she ever do?
The babysitter gets picked up by the pterosaur, grabbed by another pterosaur, dropped into the mosasaur lake, where she is then grabbed by a pterosaur doing a swan dive like a bird, which again I don't think it would be possible for it to do, just based on what we know of pterosaur physiology and how they would have flown. I don't think they would have been able to do this. And then it gets eaten and grabbed by the mosasaur, and we know she's still alive because we see her hand there on its tongue, and she gets eaten alive by the mosasaur. And what on earth did she do to deserve such a horrible death?
Like, if they gave that death to Hodgkins, I'd be like, yeah, that guy was an asshole. He deserved it. But again, she did absolutely nothing. Why did they do that?
And Owen Grady comes in with the platoon of security staff, and they start shooting pterosaurs out of the air like they're in I don't know, some World War II flick.
Man, I mean, he's got the whole superhero pose going on with his gun and everything. He's definitely channeling his Star-Lord from Guardians of the Galaxy.
And he gets ravished by a Dimorphodon, which wants to kill him. Those would weigh probably maybe 20-25 kilos. The fact that he couldn't... Well, the thing about pterosaurs is that they're incredibly lightly built. Their bones are very hollow. So even an animal the size of sort of 12 meters wingspan would only weigh about 200 kilograms.
Oh,
so the fact that Star-Lord himself here cannot push off a diminutive Dimorphodon that would have weighed about 10 kilos is kind of laughable.
Yeah.
To someone who knows dinosaurs, yes, a film does not have to be paleontologically accurate, but I think for all its inaccuracies, Jurassic Park presented dinosaurs better as animals than Jurassic World or any of the other Jurassic World movies do.
I think certainly. I think in the originals, they definitely, villainized the raptors and everything, but for the most part, even they still behave mostly like an animal would. But here, there's just so much. There's just so many examples at this point of them having these dinosaurs behave in a way that just doesn't make any kind of sense or is based in any kind of fact. Which again, like you said, they don't have to do that every step of the way, but it would be nice some of the time. And I mean, I suppose you could say they correctly have the herbivores be very docile. Like, there's...
And I would argue that the pterosaurs escaping kind of is the end of Act 2, because from here onwards we have sort of the end game play out on the island.
I would say Act 2 ends with the big raptor scene, just a little bit further than this.
The big river.
Yeah.
So moving ahead, we all know what happens. Hodgkins decides to go ahead with releasing the raptors after all.
He's just continuously an asshole to everyone.
He's continuously an asshole to them, continuously an asshole to the raptors. He has no contempt. He treats everything with contempt. And
again, for no reason though. There's never any explanation as to like something that happened to him to explain why he is so hostile and just rude and mean to every single thing around him.
And we then have this completely pointless and very unrealistic scene of Owen Grady on a bike surrounded by raptors, which is very cool. but he's driving a motorbike through
a forest
through a
floor.
fucking forest.
There's logs and tree roots and all kinds of things that would not allow you to do this.
And he just drives perfectly level, straight, and it doesn't even look like it's one of those dirt bikes. It looks like a proper old. It's a quite hefty looking bike.
Yeah. And I don't know. Even though it looks kind of neat,
it looks cool.
It does look cool, but even I, who enjoys my spectacle and my "ooh, that looks cool" kind of moments, like, you know, I'm a big MCU Marvel fan and all that. I just cannot buy a situation where someone is driving a motorcycle alongside his pack of domesticated raptors. I can't. And in this case, they basically have a mind control device on, which they keep amping up the level of stupidity with this raptor dinosaurs as weapons subplot, and I just don't understand why they went all in on this for the movie. It's so much more convoluted than what they did in the originals that I just don't understand it.
And then, of course, we have this big reveal that the Indominus Rex is part Velociraptor and is capable of talking to the raptors in order to convince the raptors to change sides, if they even had a side to begin with, to attack the human beings. And
which, hold on,
I'm not being funny. If I took my domesticated kitty cat to the zoo and plopped it in front of a lion, I somehow doubt that the cat and the lion would understand each other.
I mean, hey, maybe let's try it out. Maybe we'll all be surprised. The cat will turn on you.
I mean, let's be fair. A lot of people have difficulty understanding a foreign language, and we're human beings. Let alone the Indominus Rex talking to the Velociraptors as another superpower. It can communicate with the raptors.
Yeah. Also, it does take the RPG. I forgot about that. Also, I don't see why the Indorex would have a need or a want to have a pack at this point. Like, she had a brother who she ate. She clearly has shown that she has no need for, companions or anything. And they make a big point in the movie. It's because of how she was raised. She didn't have, interactions with other animals of her kind. Therefore, she grew up with this crazy mentality and all this. So does it all of a sudden want to have a pack of little raptor friends? That makes no sense. Also, its vocal cords quite simply would not be able to speak the same type of language as a raptor that's a quarter of its size.
What is the quote from Lord of the Rings? He does not share power.
Exactly.
The Indominus Rex would not share power.
I mean, you can't set it up as this big monster that kills everything to then be like, oh, but now it also wants its little villain friends. Like, no. You made a point that it doesn't do that.
I feel that it's just because we then have to have the raptors in the long grass scene of them killing everyone, because perhaps the film thinks it needs it, because all the other 3 films had the raptor pack moments killing people, and perhaps if this film didn't have that, it would look a bit weird. But I kind of feel that's kind of completely against what you were going for with the raptors in the first place. You domesticated. Yeah. If you wanted the raptors to be different, why go back on it now?
Yeah, and also I think it's a kind of artificial way to emotionally tug on the audience's heartstrings with the whole, oh no, Blue was my friend, but now she's trying to kill me with the Indominus Rex. And I'm personally not a fan of that in any type of storytelling. It always feels like a very cheap method to make you feel upset about the situation.
But it's okay because, she'll change her mind at the end.
Yes, because she's very, very domesticated.
But before we get there, the film has to get rid of Hodgkins, doesn't it? So we have them, they return to the park, and they return to the sort of the genetics lab, and
which looks nice. I do like the set design of the labs. I think it looks very cool.
Yes. I think that it's nicely done. We have all these faked Frankenstein monsters that Wu has apparently put together during obviously research for
Little feathered skinks and
and the two-headed animals and everything else. And it is kind of creepy. It is a bit House of Curiosity stuff. And then it's revealed they're all stealing the embryos, and Hodgkin has his big villainy speech about how they're gonna create smaller Indorexes and they're gonna make them weapons of, I don't know, I want to say weapons of mass destruction, but they're not even that, because every weaponized dinosaur in the Jurassic World franchise is a complete failure.
They do follow up on their word. The second Jurassic World movie is basically a smaller Indorex, but it's not exactly the best choice. But yes, then good old Blue comes in.
Hodgkins tries the hand thing, Blue kills him, he has a completely inconsequential death, he had a completely inconsequential part in the movie, really.
He should have been the one to get eaten by the mosasaur. He's the one who deserved that.
Yes, and then we have to have the standoff between Blue and the Owen, and Blue changes signs with the Indorex, and this starts off the end sort of 10-15 minutes of the movie, the ending battle between them.
Yes, the big action showdown, which the first one didn't really have. I mean, it did have the big extended survive the raptors sequence, followed by the T-Rex having an appearance, but it wasn't an outright fight or a big battle the way it's shown here.
And the raptors are heavily anthropomorphized, again, working with Owen Grady and such, but basically the raptors aren't enough, so they release the T-Rex.
You gotta
it's
have
one of
the
the few.
T-Rex.
It is one of the few parts of this movie I do actually like, is the scene where they open the big gate. One gate, again, only the one gate between the T-Rex and the park.
True.
But,
kind of puts a hole in my theory that they were building a second gate earlier.
Yeah. But the Rex sort of walks out towards Claire Deering, following the flare like it did in Jurassic Park. And it is the same Rex. This is Rexy, the Rex from Jurassic Park.
Oh, this is. I actually didn't realize this was supposed to be the same one.
Yep. It's the only time it's a different Rex is in The Lost World and Jurassic Park 3. And along comes Rexy with Claire Deering doing her running in high heels thing.
I mean, hey, she does it well. She is definitely the actress is actually running in those heels. She's doing a pretty good job.
Rexy smashes the Spinosaurus skeleton as a big middle finger to what happens in Jurassic Park 3, and then we have big kaiju fights between Indominus Rex and Indominus Raptor. The Indominus Rex and T-Rex.
I'm curious, would the T-Rex outright attack? I feel like maybe, just as either a territorial dispute or maybe just to scope out this big other dinosaur that it's now seeing.
Yeah, potentially. Probably a territory thing. But it's also important for us to have a big battle kaiju thing at the end of the movie, which Dominion also copies pretty much verbatim. This particular scene. The end of Dominion, the T-Rex looks defeated, and at the very last minute, along comes another dinosaur to save the Rex. And together, the Rex and the savior, other dinosaur, kills the Giga at the end of the Dominion. So basically this film and Dominion ends the same way, with the T-Rex and another dinosaur defeating the other big bad dinosaur. Again, why would the Velociraptor choose to continue to help in this fight? Why would it just not bugger off?
Yeah, it very much feels like kids playing with action figures of dinosaurs. So wouldn't it be so cool if the raptor jumped onto the T-Rex's back and then jumped off onto the Indo and was fighting them? It looks cool, but it just doesn't make any kind of sense. Although I do love how they end it with my mosasaur just coming in to kill. All right, can you guys put an end to this? I'm tired of this.
the mosasaur somehow manages decides to time its leap out of the water perfectly just to grab the Indorex, and it takes it off and drowns it and kills it, and it's the Indorex is no more. And then we have to have this really stupid scene again between the raptor and the Rex, where they kind of have some sort of understanding.
Which again,
before
they wouldn't have fought together in the first place. But then for them to have this strangely human understanding of what happened in the situation and how it's like almost implied, like, oh, you know, I won't kill you today, go our separate ways. It's such a strange humanized moment between these two dinosaurs, which I cannot recall anything of the sort in any of the original three. Again, it's been a while since I've seen 2 and 3, but I can't remember anything like that.
I suppose the raptors in JP3 verge near it when they realize there's this scene where they are handing back the eggs they've stolen to the raptors, and they have an interaction, but it's not on the same. It's not as heavy as it is in this one.
I guess there is the infamous dream sequence as well. Alan.
Yes, Alan. Which I might have to soundbite in, actually.
That's too good.
Alan.
And then the film ends with the obvious, yay, the kids are back with their family who seems happy irrespective of the divorce.
And all these people are going to sue you.
Yes, this is where the film lost me between it and Fallen Kingdom, is that Claire Dearing gets away with everything.
I mean,
she is...
To be fair, she's not the one making the decisions. She's the one... She was like the middleman who got stuck with
I think she would still probably be held liable. I think she's still in for jail time.
I don't know about jail time. I do think she'd be held liable, though. I think it would effectively destroy her career, at least in that field, which could be a good segue. Like, oh, you know, I can never do anything like that ever again, which is why I now devote my life to helping all the dinosaurs. That could have been cool. There should have been some consequences, but I don't necessarily think jail time, because again, she isn't the one who made any of the decisions in terms of like how the dinosaurs were kept or treated or anything like that. She was just a straight numbers person who was in charge of the guest experience, whereas I'm sure at least there were other professionals in charge of the actual care of the dinosaurs.
I think she was more in charge of day-to-day running than I think the film portrays. I don't think Masrani was the ultimate person who was deciding what would be the day-to-day stuff going on in the park. I think she had a lot more going on.
I mean, that may be true, but in terms of legality, it's still going to be the higher up who is responsible for that, because it's their name that's going to be on any situation like that. Like, yes, Claire will share some of that responsibility, but ultimately wasn't her who necessarily okayed these decisions.
And yeah, the film ends with, you know, the inferred romance between Claire Dearing and Owen Grady,
which
starting up.
Which again, I just don't care
which
about.
Is then is dropped in Fallen Kingdom, where apparently they split up again, and then they repeat the same romance building thing from Jurassic World in Fallen Kingdom.
Well, that's the thing that they have a lot of issues with in many TV shows and movies. It's been weirdly proven that ratings for TV shows and movies can significantly drop when two characters do get together and you don't have that romantic tension between the two of the will they, won't they. So there are a lot of shows and movies that will kind of go back on moments like that and be like, oops, we don't want to lose the audience, we'll keep that tension going. It would be better if they just built it up over a long period of time and then paid it off at the very end. But my guess is they weren't positive they were going to get a trilogy out of this, and then after this movie came out and financially was a huge success, they were like, okay, yeah, we're definitely getting a franchise, so let's do a little hard reset on those two, which is also not great writing. That's my bet as to what happened there.
So with the film over, are we that bothered about any of the characters? I mean, the brothers, I couldn't have given two shakes of a monkey if they had survived or not.
You see, I cared about them surviving, but I can't say there was any kind of true connection to them. Because again, comparing it to Jurassic Park, the two kids in that movie I found like incredibly likable. About the halfway point in the movie, I was very concerned anytime they were in hazardous situations or had a substantial like emotional scene.
And actually they are genuinely at one point hurt. I mean, Tim is electrified and killed. He has to be resuscitated.
And these kids are never genuinely hurt at any point.
I mean, even the Indo-Rex bit at the end, the kids are just they're in danger, but I kind of feel like they're not in danger, if you get what I mean.
No, yeah,
it's obvious that they're not going to at this point die.
Right. I do agree with that. It's certainly not like the two kid characters are fantastic, but again, I don't think they're completely inconsequential. They were just okay, in my opinion. They're passable. They were there.
And actually, in terms of character death that we have on screen, of the important key characters, the only one that dies is Hodgkin.
I mean, there's Masrani.
Oh, and Masrani. Okay, Masrani and Hodgkins die. In the original Jurassic Park, they killed off Samuel L. Jackson.
That's true. That is true. They also killed off the famous comedian. I always forget his name.
The lawyer. They killed off Dennis. They killed off the lawyer. They killed off Samuel L. Jackson, and they kill off Muldoon in the original film.
And they very nearly kill one of the children because his heart actually stops.
Almost kill one of the kids. So definitely, in terms of stakes and threat, the original Jurassic Park feels a lot more threatening.
True. I do think it's a fine line you have to tread with characters you kill off and characters you let survive, because you don't want to potentially kill off a character that has future storylines that could be very interesting to explore, but at the same time you don't want to fall into the other realm of that where there are no stakes and everyone just always survives. There's tons of shows and movies that fall into either of those categories. Sometimes both. You have stuff like Game of Thrones that at first they killed too many and then they didn't kill any of them. So you got to be really careful. It's a very fine line. But I do think Jurassic Park hit that pretty damn well.
In terms of Jurassic World, does it feel like a good dinosaur movie or not?
It's difficult for me to say if it's a good dinosaur movie just because I'm not inherently interested in dinosaurs all the time, so I haven't seen too many of them personally. I would say as a dinosaur movie, it's not the greatest. If I had to, definitively say what I felt. There's just a lot of it that just doesn't feel logical. Again, there's a lot of dinosaurs that are treated as monster beast creatures that are more suited to a fantasy setting, which, again, if this were some fantasy movie where there's magic and dinosaurs, I wouldn't have as much of an issue with the way some of the dinosaurs behave. But this is supposed to be, based in some kind of science and some kind of reality, and there are a lot of dinosaurs that don't behave like an actual animal does. So, do I think it's a good dinosaur movie? Not really, no. As a movie on its own, I think it's all right. If I had to give it like a number score, it'd probably be like a 7.5 out of 10. Like it's okay. It's enjoyable. It's an action adventure film. Turn your brain off. It's really not an offensive watch through or anything. And there are aspects of the film that I think are done rather well.
Let's have some positives. We've been quite negative through it all so far.
Okay. I'll go through my positives. I think the editing is rather good. It's mostly snappy, it's to the point, has a few very smoothly or creatively edited moments that for the most part is quite good. It's not exactly anything to shout about, but it's very serviceable and has a few moments of, a little bit of artistic flair, which I liked. I thought the cinematography was pretty good.
What do you mean by that?
I think the actual shots, the composition of every shot in the movie is very either by the book or actually rather good. But the color palette of the movie is not the best in my opinion, because they very frequently give everything a very flat kind of lighting. It's almost oversaturated, so on screen there are numerous types of colors and of various shades at all times, and there's never any kind of cohesion to the image. It's usually just a lot of noise on screen. Again, it doesn't look bad per se, it just lacks the cohesion that I would like. If they would just give everything a more warm or cool vibe to certain scenes, I think it would go a long ways. And even though some of the characters aren't the best, I think the acting is pretty good. Bryce Dallas Howard is a very good actor. Chris Pratt is not really doing anything interesting here. He doesn't have any real emotions or challenging scenes, so he's not anything I'm bragging about. But I do think Bryce Dallas Howard is trying her best with the material that she has. She's certainly at least putting a spin on the character. I can feel she really tried.
And of all the characters, she's pretty much the only one that gets any real development as a result of this movie.
Yeah, that's probably the main reason she's my favorite character of this movie, just because she does have a distinct arc to her character, whereas a lot of them, mostly like the most notable one being Owen, he just is action guy. Like he just is who he is, never has any real development or anything. I thought the costumes were good, not always the most functional, but they always looked very nice, well made. Their color palettes I thought were very cool. There was always a like black and blue vibe to the movie to go with this Jurassic World theme, which I thought was very nice. The sets were very well made, and it doesn't look like they filmed too much on location, but they filmed some stuff on location, which I can appreciate.
Yeah, I think the set design in general was pretty good. I like the control room especially,
yeah.
And I like the control room mostly because you have that big island in the center that's always there, which just to remind people that this is an island in the middle of nowhere, basically. Because I think it's easy to forget that for the rest of the movie.
I agree. It certainly is. Because they don't really ever deal with anything on the coast.
And I like the laboratory with all of Dr. Wu's laboratory with all his amber everywhere, and
even though it's a nostalgia fest, I think the rundown original visitor center is well made in terms of its set design. Like it's effectively very lived in, dirty and overgrown and everything.
Trying to think I just couldn't like any of the characters. None of them really wormed their way into my heart in the same way that, say, Muldoon did or John Hammond did. In fact,
I would agree. None of them like the original characters for sure.
And it's thinking about like how many lines from Jurassic Park have become quite well known. Sort of Robert Muldoon's Clever Girl and
True.
John Hammond's Spared No Expense and Welcome to Jurassic Park. And I think the best quotable lines, from this film came from Dr. Wu.
Yeah, pretty much so, which is another, original character from the originals.
How do you feel about him becoming the bad guy?
I mean, again, I'm okay with it. I just love the actor playing a villain type character that's just oozing with the evil scientist charming kind of vibe. Like I think it works for me. It's a little ridiculous, but I'm okay with it.
I was okay with them making him evil, but having watched Dominion, where they kind of backtrack on it.
Well, again, I still haven't seen Dominion, so I can't really say where they take any of these stories.
No. That's the important thing. Do you think, having seen Jurassic World, that it deserves 2 more movies?
Oh, absolutely not. I do remember seeing this in theaters. I worked in a movie theater when this came out. And again, when I came out of the theater, I was like, I liked it. It was a fun movie. And that was that. I didn't expect a sequel. I didn't want a sequel. I didn't see how you could do a sequel because, again, the idea of this big hybrid monster dinosaur, I'm like, you can't really go any further than that without it becoming truly insane. And that, unfortunately, is kind of what happened. Because I do remember seeing the trailer for the second movie, and even just seeing that there was going to be a second one, I was like, no, just it was fine. Like, it was fun to revisit the world. Just let it go. Like, that was a fun little extra Jurassic Park movie. I don't need more. And then I watched the trailer, and as soon as it showed them outrunning a volcano, I was like, yeah, I'm out, man. I just have no interest in seeing how insane you could possibly take this dinosaur story. That's not the point of Jurassic Park. Like, that's not what made it a good movie, was, you know, these insane situations that they get into with dinosaurs. It was a much more emotional and philosophical discussion about the creation of dinosaurs, but also was much more just a survival story. It's about these characters trying to survive the night, not from any specific evil creature, villain, or insane situation, just a rather straightforward, we're in the middle of nowhere, need to get back home, and there are animals out here that could kill us.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I don't think this film necessarily needed a follow-up. I don't think there's anything in this movie that really was unanswered. It was all kind of done and dusted by the end.
Yeah.
And the fact that Fallen Kingdom has to kind of backtrack on a few of its ideas to play them again in order to have the second film work. Like, we have to go through Owen and Claire romancing each other again, and then we have to have another child again, and we have to have another hybrid again, and this time with even more superpowers.
And again, having seen the second one, I haven't seen the third, but the second surely took all the insane ideas up to 11, which on some level I can respect, you know, following through with what you set up. But those ideas were so crazy. The clone child, the super-powered dinosaur, the surviving and trying to rescue all these dinosaurs from a volcanic eruption, while also not delving into anything that could be interesting with those things, like the ethical debate of whether or not to save the dinosaurs. I feel like to them they thought they did, because they had like 2 scenes at the start where they said, "Oh, should we do this? Yes, we absolutely should." No, like, that's not. Yeah, it's not a real discussion about this. There's a lot you could get into with that, and they just don't. So there's potential. Like, again, I don't think Jurassic World needed a trilogy or sequels to it, but if they were gonna do it, there were certainly ways to make it interesting and very plausible at the very least. But they did not do that. They seem to go much more the, you know, again, as much as I love my Marvel movies and the MCU, it does feel like they are trying to compete with that in a way. So they just want their dinosaur movies to be equally as bombastic and silly and fun, which that's just not really what Jurassic Park was, at least in the original days.
And I definitely think, having seen all 3 and not being particularly positive about what they've done with the franchise, I definitely think the franchise should be left alone for a while. I would certainly be disappointed if they tried to squeeze out anything more Jurassic related like within the next couple of years. And if these 3 movies are Colin Trevorrow's best work, I'm not really convinced on him as a guy to do films either. Like,
yeah,
he's the guy that did Fast and Furious, right?
Hold on, let me look up his whole filmography first. So for movies that he's directed, it looks like the only movies I've seen of his that he's directed are Jurassic World. Well, I guess only that, because I haven't seen Dominion yet, and he didn't direct Fallen Kingdom.
Oh.
But
I think
get this, he did the story for The Rise of Skywalker, which makes so much sense. It makes so much sense.
I actually forgot he did it. I mean, I think it's telling that Jurassic World has 4 people credited for its screenplay.
I mean, that's not entirely uncommon, though. There are a lot of movies that, even when they don't explicitly say that, you know, they don't name all 4 screenwriters, almost every movie is collectively written by like a team. there's a lot of times where the main story will be written by a single person, and then that team comes in and, you know, trims it up and takes out all the stuff that doesn't work. But yeah, I feel like the team did not do a great job here, because
No.
in terms of production, I think this movie was a good movie. I think all its technicals were rather well done. Like, I actually did enjoy the visual effects for the most part. I thought the sound design was good, even though it's not John Williams. There are some like really good tense music moments and all that. But the writing is where this movie just really suffers, because there are some subplots that are treated almost just like a main plot, and you spend so much time on these completely ridiculous ideas that it just kind of kills what does make the movie good.
I would agree. So generally, we think the movie was okay, not brilliant, definitely not deserving of the trilogy that it got.
No, definitely not. Or if it was going to get a trilogy, again, just a different one would have suited it much better.
Let us know in the comments, folks, what you thought about Jurassic World and what you thought about us talking about it. If this video gets relatively lots of interest, then we'll probably do one on Fallen Kingdom, I think, because that will be just an hour and a half of us absolutely trashing the film.
Yeah, I actually
everywhere.
would love to do that, because Jurassic World, I had some nice things to say about it. Fallen Kingdom, there are very few nice things, and I haven't really ripped on a movie in a long time, so I think that would be quite fun.
Okay, so let us know, folks, if you'd like to see us do Fallen Kingdom. I want to thank Nerd Guy Productions for joining in with this.
Thank you for having me.
Him bringing his cinematography knowledge. And don't forget, folks, as always, like, comment, subscribe, all the usual YouTube stuff. And I will see you in the next video. Stay safe and goodbye.
That's about it.